All right, everybody, what is going on? Good afternoon. We've got an afternoon video today. Don't do a lot of afternoon videos during this time of the year, but I got something I want to spend a few minutes talking about that I don't think is going to be a very provoking discussion topic. I don't think this is going to draw a ton of legitimate interest from this fan base for a few different reasons. But I do want to explore it because if you dig down past the surface level, there might be a little bit more intrigue here than you would initially assume. I'm talking about Brendan Sorsby. Brendan Sorsby, if you follow college football or not even college football, like NFL offseason stuff in general, you're probably familiar with the Brendan Sorsby situation. But I want to talk about it now as it pertains to the Seattle Seahawks. This video is sponsored by Prize Picks. So basically, the short version is Brendan Sorsby, once upon a time, was a very, very good and very, very promising college quarterback, seemed to have a bright future in front of him. Looked like he was going to be at some point a high draft pick, maybe even a top draft pick. It seemed like things were setting up very good for him as his college career continued to go along. And as it turns out, he had done a lot of gambling on sports, including betting on games within his own sport of college football and betting on his own team and betting on individual players on his own team. And if you go deeper and deeper into this, it's pretty expansive. This was not just something he was doing for fun. This seems to be a guy who might have a little bit of a problem. So he has ultimately been pushed off the team at Texas Tech. That's where he was going to be this upcoming year. And in the absence of being able to really do anything else, he's going to be entering the NFL Supplemental Draft. So there was a point in time where it looked like college football was going to let him play another year. But now, this is basically his only venue, his only opportunity to enter the NFL. And it's been a little while since we've had a really interesting NFL supplemental draft storyline. So this is kind of fun. But is it going to be fun for us as Seahawks fans? That's the question we got to ask. So here's kind of the bottom line thing I want to talk about. Should the Seattle Seahawks have any interest in the Brendan Sorsby situation? And I think that most people are going to reflexively answer no. And I think the correct answer is probably no. But I want to explore this for a minute here. I want to get into this a little bit. And I want to ponder, would it make sense to at least make a bid? Now, before I talk about whether or not we should get involved in this situation, I want to talk about the NFL Supplemental Draft. I don't want to get involved in the exact specifics here, but basically, it's a way for players that do not qualify for the traditional NFL draft to still get in the NFL. Basically, what happens is that a player enters the supplemental draft, and then every team in the NFL is allowed to bid on that player. They're allowed to bid using their draft picks from the upcoming NFL draft. So, for instance, every team is asked, what do you want to bid on Brendan Sorsby? And you can say a 6th round pick, and then another team can say 5th round pick, and then another team can say 3rd round pick. And whoever bids the highest pick, the most valuable pick, ultimately gets him. And Sorsby is a player that is expected to draw some bids because he is highly covetable on the football field. So it's going to cost you something. If you like sports, then the best way to make them even better and more exciting is using the Prize Picks app, where it always feels good to be right. Prize Picks makes daily fantasy simple. Just pick more or less on your favorite players and build lineups with a few taps. Whatever sport you're into, and obviously we are now firmly into the NFL offseason, so we're all about baseball. We got some basketball, we got some hockey, whatever it is you like. Prize Picks gives you a fun way to stay locked in while you're watching. Definitely make sure to use the promo code HMA. Prize Picks is hooking up users with $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. If you use that promo code, that is HMA. I've had a great time on Prize Picks so far, so definitely get on over to it, check it out, and make sure to get your lineups. And don't forget about team picks, where you can pick winners, spreads, and totals on any major game. So download the app now, use HMA, and get on over to Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. And remember, always gamble responsibly. There is a history of players costing top 100 draft picks in the supplemental draft, and there's even been a history of players going for a first-round pick in the supplemental draft, like Brian Bosworth. The Seahawks bid a first-round pick on Brian Bosworth out of college, and it obviously didn't really work out. But there is a track record of players going for a pretty high cost in the supplemental draft, and Sorsby plays the most important position in football, and he is very covetable. Like, you take a look at his college career, the last 2 years at Cincinnati with the Bearcats, he was playing some really good football. He's a great dual threat quarterback as well. He's rushed for over 1,000 yards combined over his last 2 seasons. So he can bring a lot of positive stuff to the table at an NFL level. Of course, you do have the issue of whether or not he can be on the football field because, like I said, it doesn't seem like Brendan Sorsby just kind of sort of likes to gamble on sports. It kind of seems like that he is a little bit of it's a little bit of an obsession. And look, I don't have an issue with I don't have an issue with sports gambling stuff. I mean, I think that I partake in a little bit at these local casinos here in Washington State, and I think that it can be all in good fun. But obviously, when you are participating in the sport that you are wagering on, it becomes a lot more complicated than that. And when you look at the breadth of what Sorsby was up to, it seems like there's something deeper there than just him having fun. So there's no guarantee that he gets to the NFL and becomes anything because this might get in the way. And then you have all the other issues that plague a quarterback in the NFL, like just trying to actually play at an NFL level. And he did show some promise over these last 2 years at Cincinnati. He did show that he could be an NFL level quarterback. What he did last year for Cincinnati, pretty extraordinary. 27 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, averaged a very, very impressive 9.3 adjusted yards per attempt, yards per completion, 13 and a half. This guy has a nice arm. This guy is relatively accurate. This guy is very mobile. So there is some stuff going on here that's fun. And if you are a team that does need or might need a quarterback, you can look at this and go, this is an opportunity for us to get a quarterback who, in terms of his pure talent and college production, may have been a top 10 pick, and get him much lower than that. Get him for maybe even a second round pick, or in some cases, I could see maybe a late first. I don't know exactly where it's going to go, but again, like PFT wrote this article not too long ago. Don't be shocked if Sorsby goes for a pretty high rate. Now here's the thing. The Seahawks nominally right now have a quarterback, right? They actually have one of the better quarterback situations in football because you have Sam Darnold, who just helped this team win the Super Bowl. You have Drew Lock, who is a legitimate backup quarterback that can come in and play and get it done on some level. And I know he's not ever going to be, I don't think Drew Lock's ever going to be a starting quarterback, but he can play in the NFL and not look terrible in the process. And they also have a developmental quarterback in Milroe. So on the surface, you'd be like, the Seahawks are one of the last teams you would expect to get involved in this. But Ian Rappaport didn't mention us. For whatever it's worth, and it may not be worth a lot, Ian Rappaport was on Pat McAfee's show, I think it was either yesterday or today, and he was throwing out teams that might be interested in Sorsby, and Seattle was one of them. Now, I think he was just throwing out team names at random more than anything else, but it is interesting that Seattle came to his mind, and when you start really thinking about it, you can see how he gets there. Sam Darnold came off a very nice season, but we are a year away from a big decision with Sam Darnold, because a year from now, it'll be time to extend his contract. And if Sam Darnold wants to get paid like a Dak Prescott or a Josh Allen or one of those quarterbacks, one of those hyper elite quarterbacks that gets paid the tier 1 money, this team may say, look, we don't want to do that. That's not how we're going to do our business here. We don't view Sam Darnold as a tier 1 quarterback. We don't want to play the game of paying a quarterback that we view as a tier 2 quarterback, tier 1 money. So if that situation comes up, then maybe something surprising can happen. This team has surprised us before. They moved off Russell Wilson when a lot of people said it wasn't going to happen. They moved off Geno Smith when it didn't look like that was going to happen. And I know that there were some extenuating circumstances with those two that made it happen beyond just what was going on the football field. But this team has shown a willingness to move off their quarterback that other teams don't necessarily have. And like I said, Drew Lock, this is the last year of his contract, and I think we all know that Drew Lock kind of caps out as being a good backup or a bad starter. He'll never really be the kind of starting quarterback you want to have. And we talked about Milroe about a week ago. Doesn't seem like he's developing yet, and I think this team is willing to be more patient with him, but some people, like I think Dan Viennes was talking about how he thinks that if Milroe doesn't show some progress in training camp and the preseason, the team could be kind of done with him. The team could kind of feel like, okay, we took a shot, it's not happening, and we don't think we're going to get him to where we want to get him. So at that point, you don't really have a very solidified future at the quarterback position. Now, is Sorsby the solution? He's an opportunity to buy low on a player who many would say is a future top 10 pick in the draft, but you do bring in some difficult variables. You do bring in some complicated issues that you wouldn't have with a quarterback you get in the traditional draft. It's hard enough for a quarterback to succeed in the NFL just based on talent and ability and the mentals. So I do think that there's a lot to make you say no, but I'm always going to try to be open-minded about this. So Brendan Sorsby, you'd probably have to bid at least a second round pick here, because the way it works is that teams are placed into 3 tiers, and then the supplemental draft order is randomized within that tier. And the 3rd tier, which is the bottom tier, are the teams that made the playoffs. Seattle made the playoffs last year, so they would be in the bottom tier. So if they bid a 3rd round pick, let's say it's a 3rd round pick, it's not a very good 3rd round pick. And most teams that would put up a pick like a 3rd round pick for Sorsby would have a more valuable 3rd round pick, and they would get him. So if the Seahawks put up a 3rd round pick for Sorsby, and then a team like the Vikings put up a 3rd round pick for Sorsby, the Vikings would get him because they didn't make the playoffs last year. So you're probably talking about a 2nd round pick, and there's no guarantee that works, by the way. I absolutely think there's a team out there that might be willing to put a 2nd round pick on Sorsby that was not a playoff team last year. The Jets, the Cardinals, I just mentioned the Vikings. The Vikings are a possibility. They're even a team like the Colts, if they feel like they don't think Daniel Jones is going to be the long-term answer, if they think that he's ultimately, for one reason or another, a short-term solution, then maybe you could look at them. A team like the Detroit Lions, Jared Goff is getting older. Maybe you've got something you could talk about there. So in all likelihood, even a 2nd round pick is tight. Now, at the end of the day, what you can do is just offer up the pick and say whatever happens, happens. And I would totally be willing to put up a 3rd round pick for Sorsby because he is that talented and there is that much upside there. But even when you're getting up into like 2nd round pick territory in what is supposed to be a very good draft, I think I got to say no. And to be perfectly honest, Seattle, to get a real high probability chance of getting Sorsby, you're probably talking about a 1st round pick. And there's no way I'm doing that. There's just no way. Even if we pick 32nd overall again in this draft, I'm just not putting that pick up for a player that is this big of a question mark when I know I'm going to go into the next offseason with needs beyond just quarterback that I'm going to have to address. So I think the answer is ultimately no. But one thing to think about, Sorsby has a very good chance of ending up in the division, even if Seattle doesn't get him. So as fans, we should care a little bit. Like Arizona, that is considered to be one of the most likely Sorsby destinations. So even if we don't get him, we're going to have to deal with him for a while. Or he'll wash out of the league in 2 years and go sell used cars or life insurance or something. But very good chance that he ends up going to a team like the Cardinals, and I don't think you can completely rule out a team like, as weird as it would be, even the Rams might get involved a little bit here, depending on how they really feel about Ty Simpson. There's reason to believe they don't totally buy what he's selling, and there's a limited amount of time between now and the time when they're going to need another quarterback to replace Stafford. So one way or the other, Sorsby is maybe going to get involved in our futures here. I don't know how to feel about it, but I just wanted to discuss the topic for a little bit here because I don't think I'll have to make another video about this topic because ultimately Sorsby is more than likely going to end up on some bad team that is just desperate for a bite at the apple on a franchise quarterback like the Jets, like the Cardinals, teams that have nothing really going on long term at the position. But I wanted to at least explore it because this is a good prospect. On some level, this is a good prospect. All right, let me know what you guys think. I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks. Everybody have a good rest of your day. And I mean, had to talk about it for a minute here, guys. There's a world where a team has their fortunes massively changed for the better by this Sorsby situation. There's a chance somebody gets a franchise quarterback that should be a top 10 pick for a second rounder because of this situation. And that can completely turn the fortunes of a franchise almost single-handedly. All right, I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks. What do you make of it? Should the Seahawks get involved? And look, if the Seahawks want to just offer up something, just to offer up something, even if they want to say, hey, let's throw up a 6th round pick and see what happens, I'm sure they would do that. But what I'm really asking is, should they seriously get involved? Should they offer up a 2nd round pick? Because I don't think a 3rd round pick would be serious. Should they try to get seriously involved, even knowing what it would cost? All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks. Interesting topic.